In first grade, my mom decided to open enroll my sister and I in the Edmonds Academy of Fine Arts. So we rode the bus from our mostly white working class neighborhood to this, what was somewhat of a prestigious magnet school with a heavy emphasis on the fine arts, music, drama, etc. And they were known for their talented and gifted program. Sounds really special, I know, and it was, but it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. It was still a public school, so the kids who lived nearby went there no matter what. It was nestled right in the middle of the same neighborhood you would call the projects if you lived in Chicago or New York. It was several one-floor apartment buildings called Homes of Oak Ridge. And it was well known as the roughest place in the city. So the smart little gifted kids, of which I wasn't one, I was there because they wanted my sister, who could read since she was 3. We were bused there from all over the city to attend this great institution of fine art learning, while the other kids from the surrounding neighborhoods were there to be shown they were just as valuable as anybody else. I don't mean to set this up like it was a bad thing. Edmonds was a wonderful place to go to school because our school's population was so diverse. For me, it was the first time I would be around so many minorities at once. And I've come to believe that all kids should grow up in such diverse circumstances because, after all, that's the real world. So as my sister was taking all of her gifted classes, I had one main focus for those first several weeks of first grade. I needed to get into a fight. No boy, at least where I came from, could possibly be considered tough unless he'd been in a scuffle or two. I had had my share of little dust-ups, but I'd never been in a real fight. That was going to change in first grade. So the first couple of weeks of first grade, I decided to put my plan into action. We had recess at the same time as the kindergartners. And I didn't really know anybody, so like a cowboy in the Old West, I was looking to make a name for myself. So, I was a small kid, but I got beat up by my sister all the time, so I wasn't afraid of an altercation. And there was one kid in particular I had my eye on. He was bigger than me, but as most kids thought at that age, I was older, so naturally I had to be tougher. He was kind of oafish. He was a tall, chubby kid with a dorky laugh, so I figured he made an easy target. So I approached this group, not really knowing how to start this party. I just knew I was looking for a fight. And I had to let the other prisoners on the cell block know I wasn't a guy to be trifled with. So I approached the group like the badass I was, and I just asked straight up, who thinks they're tougher than me? There's a few boys there and a couple of girls, and they all just stopped and looked at me like I was crazy. So right then I realized nobody was scared at all. So I had to step up the intimidation a bit. I'm a first grader. I said, thinking that would work. And it did, with one kid who happened to be the big oaf I had my eye on to begin with, he just giggled and said, "Whoa, I'm out of here," and ran off with like most of the other kids. There's only one kid left. There's this little black kid named Akeo. And he was smaller than me, so I stood my ground once he matter-of-factly just said, "Okay, I'll fight you." "All right then, let's go." It was weird because nobody was angry. And there was no argument that preceded this fight. But I wasn't ready for what would come next. It was my understanding that a real fight started with a few shoves and maybe a little bit of wrestling until somebody gave up or a teacher broke it up or one of us jumped off the top ropes and landed the fatal elbow to the head right before the 3 count. And I was taught you never threw the first punch. So I actually didn't even understand how in the hell a real fight ever happened in the first place. But not in Akeo's world. In his world, you didn't screw around. In his world, if somebody stepped up to you, you backed them off. And you did it now. So before I even got a chance to shove the kid, a small fist came right between my eyes. And I remember actually watching it come at me as it landed with the perfect precision of a prize fighter. My head snapped backwards. I'm pretty sure I was crying before I even hit the ground. This teacher heard my wailing and immediately came running over to see what was wrong. "He hit me." And she hauled him off to the principal's office. It didn't matter that I totally provoked him. I got my ass kicked and somebody was going to get in trouble for it. Nobody cared that I deserved what I got. And nobody cared to hear his side of the story. So the next year, I decided, this time I'm going to do it. So I approached him one day after school to take another crack at it. Pretty much the same story. I ran my mouth a bit, and here came that fist again. Head snapped back, I cried, and Akeo got in trouble. Again, didn't matter that I provoked him or that I deserved what I got. He was a neighborhood kid, and I was a little white boy from across town, so naturally he had to have been picking on me. So the next year, I transferred schools for unrelated reasons, and for about a year and a half, and then I found myself back at Edmonds for 5th grade. And the first day of school, I was watching the 4th graders file in, and there he was, my arch rival. Akeo was in the class right behind me. But I was different now. I've been in a few fights since our little confrontations and done all right thanks to the lessons I learned getting pounded by him. And he was different too. Now, he was about a foot taller than me and outweighed me by probably 30 pounds. So I figured, why fight him now? I already knew I was tough enough based on the other altercations I'd had. What did I have to prove? I'd already gotten back up after getting knocked down several times, so I figured this time I'd get back up by not getting knocked down in the first place. See, that time in my life, I defined manhood by toughness, or at least making other people think I was tough. It sounds like testosterone-laden bullshit, But for me, it was true. I bonded with my dad and my stepdad over watching sports, and we would sit and wait for those moments when fighting would break out. Benches cleared in baseball, those big Tyson fights, any sort of sick move during professional wrestling. My dads, both of them, and I, we would cheer and yell and encourage more beating. That was being a man. My dad played a lot of slow pitch softball. And I remember overhearing one time talking to his friends, blue collar working class guys, about beating the shit out of some guy. My dad was the pinnacle of cool to me, and his friends seemed to remember that story fondly. So my brain conflated the two. Toughness was coolness. Being a man meant being able to throw down. But then you grow up and you realize you can't just go around clocking people. Slowly, I changed from defining manhood with toughness to understanding that manhood is about resiliency. It's not about being able to beat somebody up. It's about learning how to take a beating and still dust yourself off. It's that line from the movie Creed. It's not how hard you hit. It's how hard you can get hit and still get up for more. KO never said anything to me about our fights. We were in different grades, so we didn't really interact. I think to him, it was just another fight in a long line of many, and his opponents likely ran together. I'd find out several years later that KO was shot and killed in a drive-by. And I can't help but think maybe our little confrontations helped shape his outlook on life, or maybe even put him in that life. To me, Akeo was just another guy, just another smaller kid that maybe I could prove my manhood against. Race didn't play a role for me, but it clearly did for him. If not in his own mind, in the consequences. The poor kid never stood a chance. If he could be completely provoked into giving somebody what they deserve, and he'd get in trouble anyway, no matter what his side of the story was, why bother? I hope it's not true, but I wonder if our little confrontations were what made him feel like maybe his life wasn't worth a shit and nobody would listen anyway. Akeo doesn't get the benefit of the 32 years of hindsight that I do. You see, the power of white privilege in America isn't about being handed a financial status or some kind of conspiracy where there's a system set up for me to more easily succeed. While those are somewhat true, they're ripple effects. The power of white privilege in America is about receiving the benefit of the doubt, always and about everything. Once I understood that, I had empathy. And once I had empathy, came understanding. And with understanding came growth. And with growth came evolution. And it's evolution that is the key to the survival of the human race. My little first grade mind didn't have the capacity to put that together. But if I could go back to first grade me, I would tell him to do the right thing. And maybe tell that teacher I had it coming. Then maybe fights 2 or 3 don't happen. Maybe a KO and I would have been friends. And maybe he would have ultimately chosen a different path. I'll never be able to say anything to a KO. I know that. But if I could, I would say thank you for those beatings. They were the proudest beatings I ever took. Thank you for helping me evolve. And I'm sorry.